thing is welcome to Venus Consciousness. Thank you, three beautiful humans, for joining me for this live session today. And I was thinking about before I came on what I was going to talk about. And I realized that for me, because of what I've just been sort of dealing with before I got on the Zoom is abundance and the topic of financial abundance and what does that mean? Why is it such a tricky thing on this planet? The whole thing of money and finances, and how do we get to a place where we can have abundance in our lives, whether it is financial or otherwise, because we all know that there are many other forms of abundance that aren't just financial. And I think that really, when we can tap into the energetic experience of abundance, that's when we really experience abundance on all planes, material and otherwise. So I think that it's important to understand that money and finances are part of a bigger picture. It's the reason it gets so tricky is because, and I was talking about this before, but no one could hear me, is that we have our finances tied into survival because the way that it works now that we don't live in a world of barter and trade is we have an experience of, if you don't have enough, it's going to be really hard to survive. And being, no one wants to be living on the streets or, homeless or food scarcity is a real issue for a huge portion of the planet because of the way that the resources are distributed. And we don't have to this not, we could all go off for years about the inequitable way that that money drives our world economies. So I'm not going to get into that, although I know that anyone watching this and those of you with me, Lauren, Adrian, and I'm guessing I have someone else that for some reason their name's not showing up, but that we all agree on the fact that the inequitable way that money exists on this planet could drive any of us, anyone with a heart, quite literally just crazy with sort of frustration and sadness. But so, what I'm going to more talk about is my personal journey with abundance because I am right now planning a move to Spain with my kids. And it's a move that is complicated and there's lots of moving parts. And me with my ADHD brain is trying to keep up with all the paperwork and all the things. And at the basis of this move is the huge piece of gratitude and understanding and acknowledgement of the privilege that I have to be able to make a choice to move to another country and bring my children. And and so I think that that brings me to this place of I was like, well, what should I talk about with my life? And I was like, I think that the topic of abundance, it's widely used in spiritual communities in a lot of the platforms here. You have the growth gurus, you have everyone here um wanting and hoping I would assume to create something with our creativity and with our voices that provides abundance, that provides resources flowing in, as well as us giving our gifts out. And in an ideal world, I think that I was actually just listening to a channel. If you guys who follow me, you know that I channel my own wisdom and I follow other channels. And there's a famous one named Bashar that I have been watching some of his reels on other social media platforms. And I forget the name of the man that channels Bashar, but he is a channeled being that if you listen to the channeler, the human who talks that Bashar talks through, I just get a lot of wisdom from just even watching like a 1 minute reel. And in my last live, or maybe it was the one before that, I did go into a little bit of, how come I've been drawn to listening to channelers growing up in Boulder. It's a very new age town with very alternative. I had alternative parents that exposed me to this idea of energy and having beings that don't exist in human form that have access to communicate, and that was like a spirituality being a very normal part of my upbringing. So to me, it's not strange to think of someone channeling someone else and not talking with their own voice, but talking with someone else's wisdom. Um, but really for me, I can intellectually explain it, but the reason that I have always been drawn to them, to people who channel, is that when they would channel and when I would tune into their messages, I would feel a sense of, being at home. I would feel a sense of expansion, like, I would feel less afraid, less anxious, more at home, more centered, and so I'm sure that there are probably some very out there experiences of people doing things that are maybe not energetically aligned with who I am, but the ones that I have found, that I have followed, have been people that they speak when they're channeling and they speak when they're not, and I like them as a human. I like what they stand for. I like the mission that they like. Esther Hicks is one, Lee Harris, and then I don't know Bashar's. I'll have to find it, the name of the man that channels him. But when they are themselves, they're a little bit quirky and maybe a little bit more shy when you listen to them do interviews and talk. And then they close their eyes, and some of them, traditional channeling, you close your eyes and channel. Me as a channel, because I've been developing that skill too, I don't have like message downloads come through like that where I could just talk and talk and talk with someone else coming through. So I just talk from my own wisdom. But I have done the practice of, because one of the channelers, Lee Harris, teaches you how to be your own channel. And the way that he started, and that many people start, is through writing, where and I have done a post about this, channel writing, where you basically, it's almost like free writing, but it's a little bit more intentional in that you take out your journal or your keyboard and you say, what does my higher self or my spirit guides, if you're someone who believes in spirit guides, which I do, like, what does this other dimensional side, the collective subconscious, the part of me that I don't have access to, all the time. And my little camera's blinking at me, so hopefully nothing is being wonky for you guys. But anyway, and then you sit down and you start writing and you see what comes through, and you try not to block yourself. You just sort of basically try not to lift your pen from the paper, or try not to sort of stop and think too much. Hi, Noelle, welcome. And so, when I did this course of Lee Harris's, it was probably back around the time of COVID. And I started with handwriting because my very first post when I got on Substack talks about this. And I don't think I've told this story on a live. So, anyway, I am going to get back to financial abundance. I went on the channeling side tangent. And when I do these lives, I just let what needs to come through come through. And I think that there is a piece about channeling that I am meant to talk about with people that tune into me, because not everyone, I feel like, is exposed to what it is and to the wisdom that we can get from these experiences of people that are able to access other parts of consciousness and then bring it through. And that leads me to another side tangent, that Uranus, which is, I'm still learning astrology, but it's the planet, I think, of sort of magic and movement. Someone, if there's astrologers on here, could probably correct me, but I don't know exactly what Uranus stands for, but I do know that it's moved out of Taurus into Gemini. And I do know that Gemini is considered the sign, it's the twins of communication, written and spoken. So I feel like for all of us here on Substack that is obviously one of our gifts, is to be able to take language and and channel it out, because that's basically what even any writer is doing. I remember, who's pretty famous these days, from Eat, Pray, Love, Elizabeth Gilbert was doing a TED Talk, and she talked about how when she's writing, she feels like she also is channeling something beyond her, that is like a wisdom that I think as a poet or a writer, we feel the muse. A friend, James, who I'm friends with, a writer here on Substack that you guys are probably mutuals with too, he does a lot of self-love, self-healing journey stuff. And he's been talking about the muse and making some posts about when the muse takes him, and he talks about her in a feminine sense, sort of like the divine, the divine goddess of communication, or his inner self, inner feminine, the receptive side. But however you want to call it, there is, and even in ancient Greece, I think they had a term for it too. This idea of tuning into the archetypes, the flow of something beyond us, and channeling it out through us. And I think all art is doing that. And we are all infinitely connected to this sort of universal field where we gather, where our dreams come from, where this emotional subconscious state where we all go through similar trials and errors as we learn and we heal and we exist. And then those of us who are called to be writers and talkers and artists, we are more consciously channeling in this information. So, anyway, when I very first started my Substack and when I very first started channeling and I wanted to write about my channeling as my very first post for Substack, I was doing a retreat. So, like, also the thing is about being able to channel is that you guys might notice, like, you have to clear your mind before you sit down to start writing. You have to be in a slightly receptive state. And so, even like for this live, I felt like I was feeling a little bit blocked before coming on. And normally I just like feel like it's really flowing, but because I wanted to talk about financial abundance, which I think is a fairly blocked finances, it's a very blocked energetic material heist or coup that's been taken over. Like, that energy has been co-opted. It's one of the biggest ways that power maintains absolute power. And so I think maybe that's a reason why I was like, I want to talk about that. And then there was this sort of feeling in me, like I came on a little late, and then you guys couldn't hear me for the first 5 minutes. And it was this feeling of like that block exists. And I'm gonna get back to talking about that. But I think getting to my point before of, because my vocation being here talking to you guys, your vocation of your artistic expression and your mission to sort of share your journey, to be a storyteller, to be someone who is sharing with others from this place of this sort of channeling the subconscious. And that these specific channelers, getting back to Bashar, who is a channeled being who gives a lot of wisdom, and to my history of being open to this way of communicating with something beyond us. Um, when I very first did it, I was a teenager and I had just done a 4-day solo in the alpine mountain high country, and I hadn't eaten, and I was like alone with my thoughts and beginning to process some of this early grief that I didn't even know what it was about, around heartbreak and loss, and not even having at that point gone through so much of the trials and tribulations that were going to come in my adult life because of my early trauma, not having remembered the early trauma, but still having it well up in me as I sat in this meadow for a couple days among the wildflowers under this beautiful pine tree grove. And at the end of like day 3, where I was like sort of beside myself, but also very euphoric, like I'd been drawing little nature fairies and sitting by the creek and just like letting, this is after 3 weeks of being up in the mountains and just being very attuned to all of the nature spirits around me. All of a sudden, I picked up my little journal and I started writing, and I felt this wave of consciousness. I was like, I am answering every question, every answer to every question I ever had. And I just journaled and filled up the whole journal. And that was the only time I had really channeled something bigger than me, where it didn't just feel like me and my small, because we talk about small s, little s, the small self, the human self, the mind that is often worried about our survival and about being hurt and trying to manage vulnerability and tenderness, and the very human side of us being the small s. And then we have the big S, which is our spirit self. And that is very much a continuum, because energy doesn't have, even this material plane that seems so solid is actually all broken down into moving particles. So really everything is in movement. But we get so stuck, again, with me being stuck before coming to talk about finances and the material plane. It's one of the ways that the material plane keeps this very strong limitation on us. But when we can have our big S coming through, which is that part that connects to everything, there's a feeling of flow. And I think that as we evolve as a planet, as we wake up, as we free ourselves from the constraints of being enslaved by these powers of absolute power corrupting, and the energy forces that have been co-opting humanity and keeping everyone so on the rabbit, even those of us that have enough to survive, that have the privilege of sitting here and being writers, and we're not starving for food in a developing nation or a war-torn country. We're still sort of having to free our minds and free ourselves, and worry about the finances. So it's part of the limitations that I was talking about in my last live and wrote an article about, of that we purposely sign up for on earth that is a very dense planet with a lot of limitations so that we can work with them and overcome them and embody this body that has these limitations and imbue it with spirit, be a human being, be a being in a human, and let that being shine forth. And that's what we're doing. And then as we do that, we're able to break the code or, in the matrix, like be the maverick that sort of takes that conditioning of being enslaved and frees ourselves so that we can use the confines of still having a human body, still being in this society, but begin to make it work for us and begin to help others and begin to understand this thing of abundance. And okay, so now I go full circle back to this man who channels Bashar, who was watching one of his reels recently, and Bashar was saying that the future of where we're going as a planet is one in which we have an exchange that he was saying will be going, in the next several decades to half a century, let's say, we will be evolving into a system. Now, right now we're in the breakdown. It doesn't look like anything's evolving. All we're seeing is the crashing down of the old. And then because they don't want to go down without a fight, it feels like they have a stronger hold on us than they've ever had with like threats of nuclear bombs and the world at war and prices skyrocketing. But underneath that, there is this desperate attempt of the powers that be to stay in control. But we know that, like I talk about this all the time, you can't stop a superbloom, you can't stop evolution. We are the change. It is happening. And so I subscribe to this idea that, like, even though we're in the birth canal and it feels heavy and intense, there is a birthing of a new earth. And so in the coming decades, we're going to more and more begin to uncover. And those of us that are here talking about it, writing about it, the healing journey, and even this little thing touching upon Uranus again, bringing in this movement of communication, entering into this age of communication, um, we have the opportunity to share ideas to lay the framework for a new way of doing things, including the finances. And so what Bashar was saying was that we will be creating systems in which almost like we go a little bit more backwards to like the barter system that we used to have, but also um continue. It's not that we'll get rid of money, but what he was saying is that it that abundance exists, and this goes back to what I was opening with when no one could hear me. Abundance is not just money, and it is that is a level of the material plane where you see abundance, either lack of abundance or abundance playing out when you have enough money to do something. And money being, the currency that operates power. You need money to have agency and power, because if you don't have enough money, you can't be really activating your agency because you're too busy surviving. So it's like you need to have the abundance and the financial abundance to get from the baseline of survival to the next level up, or version 2.0, where you can begin to live your dream. So they're very interconnected. But what Bashar was saying, and what I have come to understand, and that is going to lead me to the second half of this talk, which is my story of coming into abundance, is that we have to see it as a continuum. We have to see money just like we're the human, but we're the being, and we have to start to imbue the material, our material body and everything around us with this idea that we are the being inside it. We are the light. We are the divinity. We have to. I saw a post that I reposted about bring your human into alignment with your divinity, and be the being shining the light inside your human. So anyway, this idea that Bashar was talking about, that like it is more in the future, we will be exchanging goods in a way where, like, I have a gift, you have a gift, we can exchange them together. Money will still be a part of it, he was saying, but it'll be much more synchronistic. And have any of you guys noticed when you're really in the flow, like when you just are on fire, you're feeling aligned, you're feeling healed, I'm sorry, feeling healed in the line. I'm like realizing that I'm a tiny bit thirsty, and I made myself some tea. And also, look, what would Dolly do? It's a cup that my friend gave me. And I love it because Dolly Parton is the woman. who got me inspired to start singing again and singing. And it was during the time when I started journaling and channel writing and touching into this fact that I was like, I was a Waldorf teacher with like an elementary Waldorf teacher teaching younger children. I am a mom, but I was like, I'm meant to do something more. And it began to like during that COVID time when I think a lot of us were like sloughing off like this dreamlike state of like what we'd been sort of stuck in for, if you're older like me, a good part of your life, and realizing that you had a different mission. And as it began to slough off, I was like, it has to do with me, with communicating, performing, speaking, writing. And it was like, and if I don't do it, I feel like a part of me is dying. Like, yes, I love being a mom and that chapter of my life of being a teacher. Now that I'm doing these lives, I'm like, that's why I did all that teaching. Like it was preparing the soil. And don't you realize that with anything in your life, like you go back and you look at something that maybe at the time felt like a detour. Like at the time I was like, I should have, maybe if I had just pursued music, I would, because music was really feeling like this thing that needed to come out. And I luckily was able to make an album and really nurture that creative dream that I had always had, that I felt like I'd sort of let go of or stomped down or said, you're not good enough. And I had become a mom and a teacher because it was more practical. Again, getting back to that abundance, I was like, I'm either gonna be probably a waitress, like singing in crowded bars with my guitar, trying to songwrite and sing, or I could actually have a career and become a teacher. And I love teaching, and teaching is, especially in a Waldorf school, is a very creative endeavor. It's a very creative career because you're doing the arts. Like I wrote plays for my class and you sing to them all the time and you draw, and it's a lot of creativity as well. But again, now I'm realizing as I'm like stepping into my mission more, which thanks to you guys, allow me to have a place and a voice where I can be like, this is my mission. This is why I came. And you've probably heard quotes, and getting back to this place of abundance. Abundance is a feeling. It's a place in your heart. It's um oh gosh, like I can tell when I'm getting close to something in my heart because I get sort of choked up. But like it's the privilege of a lifetime. I think someone wrote this, to be able to follow your calling and to be able to act on it. And this abundance is a state of mind, just like war and peace is a state of mind. Like it's an inside job. I talk about that. Peace is an inside job, war is an inside job. It all is a reflection. And so as we become healed and we heal the parts of us that are at war, or the parts of us that have lack of abundance, and feel really oppressed, and as we begin to come into a place of feeling gratitude and feeling aligned with our mission, it's the privilege of actually many countless lifetimes to be in a place where you can be following your calling. Like it just, I don't know, it's just making me it's making me tear up because like if you think about how many people, including our ancestors, came to lay down the foundation, lives of servitude, and how many lives we've had where we have been in a position of even most of this life for me and probably for you guys in a position of servitude, of like just pushing that boulder up the hill of not a lot of opportunity to feel that huge feeling of expansive abundance and gratitude. Not that there aren't moments of gratitude, but the privilege to be able to come into a place in your heart and in your life where that comes into alignment, where you can start to follow your mission. It's a huge privilege. So anyway, I feel called to like say thank you to all the humans that have walked this path before us, all our ancestors who have given us this opportunity. And it's time for a little love. Little Venus love. Um, yeah, so getting into that, like if when we can tap into this place of abundance, it is more, and as Bashar was saying, it is more than a material experience. It's an experience of being able to be in the flow. Like as I was saying, when you get into a place of synchronicity where you have something to give and then someone else has something to give. And as I was beginning to say before I got choked up, when you are in that flow, you notice that like I've had days like this and you guys can probably relate where like you notice hi, new joiner. Hi Bruno. Welcome. Welcome to my little um talking about abundance. But you guys maybe have had the experience of where things just flow and like you're like, "Oh, I need to connect. I need that resource or I need to connect to this person or and then all of a sudden it just flows and like the conversation you needed to have, the place you needed to be at the right time, in the right place at the right time, like all of the synchronistic connections begin to happen and it begins to feel a lot less like you're walking through this heavy thick sludge, which is I think how we a lot of us feel here on planet earth because Bashar was like, on my planet this is how we do it. And I was like, that sounds really good, I'm excited for that, I'm excited for earth to get there. But it was like this idea of like you're in the right place at the right time. So the exchange of energy, which is the underpinning of everything, and also goods and material exchanges where you're giving and getting, giving and getting. There's this beautiful children's story about it. That all my kids' books are right behind the couch because we're sorting them. But I was like, "Oh, I could probably find it." But anyway, it's about this idea of exchanging and this woman who wants to make an apple cake and she has some apples. No, she has plums and she doesn't have apples. So she goes along the road and one neighbor doesn't have apples, but the neighbor happens to have a bunch of geese. And so she exchanges the plums because the neighbor's like, "Oh, my husband loves plums." And then she gets the neighbor raises and the neighbor gives her a bunch of feathers and she's like, "Well, at least I'm traveling lighter than I was before." And then the old woman goes along with her feathers and she comes upon a couple and they're arguing in their garden. They have this beautiful garden full of flowers, but they're arguing about making a pillow for the couple's mother. And she's like, "No, I've always heard you put straw on the cushion," because it's like an old-fashioned story. And the partner's like, "No, I always heard you put," I forget what he said. "You put, what did they do it? Like hair." I think they did hair and straw. "No, you put horsehair in it. No, you put straw." And then the old woman comes along and she's like, "What about feathers?" And they're like, "Feathers, even better." And they're like, "What can we give you for these feathers?" And she's like, "How about some of your flowers?" And so they cut a bunch of flowers from their garden and they give it to her. And she's walking along with all these flowers. She's like, "Well, I don't have the plums. I don't have my apples for my apple cake yet, but I got these flowers." And she walks along and there's this man on the road. And I'm so glad this story came to me because it is so perfect for the point I'm trying to make. So there's this man on the road and hi, we have a new joiner, Tia or T. I don't know how to say your guys' names, but welcome. Anyway, and she's walking along and she's like, "Well, at least I had these beautiful flowers." And this downtrodden man, he comes along and he's like walking and he's beautiful. He's got like this golden cape and this beautiful gold medallion. And he's like, "I'm gonna go see the love of my sweetheart, and I have nothing to give her today. I'm gonna show up empty-handed." And the old woman's like, "How about this beautiful bouquet of flowers?" And she hands it to him, and he's like, What can I give you in exchange?" And he's like, I have to give you something." And he's like, "I'll just give you this medallion." And he takes off this like big golden medallion and hands it to the old woman. And the old woman's like, um, she's like, "Are you sure?" And sort of like taken aback. And he's like, "Oh, you've saved my day. My love is now going to have a beautiful bouquet of flowers." And he goes like rushing off and he's all like excited because for him, again, this thing of like, this story is talking about how like everyone has their gift to share. And it's a lot like what Bashar was saying on this channel. Like, in a time when you get into a place of abundance and flow, and when we have broken down these systems of like the people at the top like keeping us all enslaved so that they can have wreak havoc on in the craziness of this like egoic, tantruming, narcissistic, like worst of the worst, absolute power creeps absolutely. And sorry, my phone is not on silent and is going off. But you probably guys probably can't even hear it. Anyway, back to my story. When we can get out of that place where Earth has been ensnared and get to this place, like this story or Bashar's talking about. So then she walks along and she's holding this medallion, and he's all happy going off to see his lover, and the couple's happy they have their pillow. And the woman who gave the feathers was like she like loves plums and got some plums. And the woman goes into town and there's a woman crying and she's like, "We're going to be evicted from our apartment." And she's holding a baby, nursing it, and she's a toddler and she's like, "I just don't have any more." And the old woman's like, "You know what?" She's like, kind friend, have this necklace. I don't want you and your children out of your apartment." And the woman's like, "Oh, are you sure? Like, we're gonna have enough to buy bread and to be in our apartment?" And the woman's like, "Yeah." She's like, "You know what? Never can it be said of me that I have not helped someone in need." She's like, "I feel good, even if I don't get my apple cake." And, she, like, keeps walking, and the woman's like, "No, no, don't leave yet. Here, have this puppy." She's like, "I can't take care of it with my kids." So the old woman's like, "Okay, I'll take a puppy." So she's, like, walking with her puppy, and she's like, "I think I'm just gonna go home. This has been a very good day, even if I didn't get my apple cake." But on her way back, she passes by a neighbor that she hadn't noticed that happens to have an apple tree full of apples. And he's sad and he's sitting there down and he's like, "I just am so lonely. I wish I had some companionship." And the puppy like jumps out of the woman's arms and goes and like starts he like goes up to the to old man and the old man lights up and the woman's like, "Do you want this puppy?" And she's like, "And do you mind if I have some of your apples? Because I've been really craving an apple cake." And he's like, "Go for it." So she takes the apples and she goes home and she makes the most delicious, scrumptious apple cake for her dinner. And it's full of warm spices. And she eats it fresh out of the oven and she thinks, "Ah, I got to have my apple cake." And so the point of this story is imagine a world where we live in this place where you get to have your desire and you are in the right place at the right time with someone else who has a different desire. And you not only do you have a desire, but you have a gift. So we're all equal exchange of things that might be very diversified, but there's this flow that happens and one takes care of the other, takes care of the other. And that's how it works according to Bashar, and for those of you who join, you'd be like, "Who's Bashar?" But I'm not gonna get into it. You can rewatch it if you want, and for anyone who sees this, they'll be like, "Aha, she's going somewhere with this big, long story." But basically, the idea being that Earth is evolving and that we abundance is more than just the finances. We when we can break free of this system that is currently doesn't seem like it's crumbling because 'cause they're fighting for dear life to keep the control they've had for eons, and it's not just the players that we see, like the political leaders, like there's more just like Bashar channels in. I've had dreams about this and The Matrix. There's so many movies that point to this and it's not conspiracy. They would have us think it's conspiracy so that we don't actually realize what's actually going on, but there is always layers to everything, just like an onion. We know life is complex. And so when you see someone acting out in a really dark way, there are also thought forms, energy forms, systems that exist beyond that one person that play into it. And so there are systems in place that benefit. And I'm not saying there's a bunch of machines like in the Matrix that are just like harvesting us, but it's a metaphor. There is energetic harvesting that happens. And when we break free of that system that's been using us, and we get to a place like some of these other more evolved planets that exist where this flow can happen, you begin to realize that that's where we're moving. And in terms of my own personal journey, I can say that I've been in both places. I was when my first husband attacked me and he ended up going to prison. I ended up going into a safe house apartment with my 2 little girls, like going on the run. Like I had to flee from our home because I wasn't sure if he was, he attacked me with the threat of wanting to kill me, and I didn't know if he was like, you know, what most domestic violence, most women who are killed by, or killed and or beaten by their partners, and so it is an unfortunate fact. And I was telling you guys about Dolly Parton because I love her. She's another, sort of rags to riches story about how she believed in her dream, but she grew up in the Appalachian Mountains where there's a lot of poverty on a farm with like 12 siblings. And I love her autobiography, but she had a dream that she was going to be able to make it. And she did it from this place of love and joy. And she, laughed and they all laughed at her when she, and her coat of many colors. That's another children's story. She made that song into a children's story. And she's like, it was the most precious thing she had, and her mom sewed it for her from a bunch of rags. And I'm like thinking of the chorus, coat of many colors that my mother sewed for me. Um, it had so many, it's something, something that the children they couldn't see. And she talks about how like coat of many colors was the most precious thing she had, and while my mama sewed it, she would tell the stories true, and it's something about, like, how her mother sewed this coat for her out of rags that people gave to them, like, old they used to exchange, like, when they would, take apart an old blanket that was falling apart, and that her mother made her this coat of many colors, and the children all made fun of her, and she's like, "Didn't they see this coat of many colors was like precious because it was made with love, and even though it was made from rags, it was made of love." And so I think, again, that's another story that I wish I could have remembered more of the lyrics because it's a really sweet song. But it is this idea of the value of abundance is really a heart experience. And when you can tap into that heart experience of what truly has value, and someone on Substack recently posted, the most unseen privilege is a supportive family. And when you can tap into whether it's a family or whether it's a chosen family, um, this experience of abundance that comes from feeling gratitude, from tapping into your passion, from being in the right place at the right time, from exchanging, from having a desire, from having a gift to give to the world, and from this give and take, give and take, give and take, you end up coming into a place of abundance. And also being able to cultivate this feeling of, sitting in your wounds and being like, I deserve something more. Because a lot of my healing journey, getting back to when I was in this place, like, without anything, just like Dolly came from, very meager means, but she followed a dream. When I had to be at one point homeless, I trusted. I was like, "You know what? I trust that I will find what I need, that I'll be taken care of." And an apartment in this safe house came up right at the same time that I didn't have a home, that we were like left the state, we fled, and we were staying with friends of friends, like, in Washington. We were from Colorado, but I drove up to Washington State because a friend of mine had some siblings there that had a place where we could stay. And it's hard to have a place when you have two little kids. Like, no one really wants to, like, have you plus a baby and a toddler. Like, it's high impact as a guest. So, like, that feeling of not having anything, but trusting that it was gonna be okay, and then beginning to manifest. Because at the time, I was following Lee Harris, who again was channeling these beings who are like, "Earth has to get it. Earth isn't quite there yet, but you guys will be there." And I was following his teachings, and one of the things I did was I put, on the little icon on my computer that was like the folder for where I had all this credit card debt that I had to go into collection to pay off because I didn't have a job because I was on the run with my 2 kids. And, the credit cards had been in my name, and since my husband was like ex-husband was going to prison, like, I was the one that was gonna have to pay for it. But I was following Lee Harris, who was like exactly what I'm talking about. Abundance is an experience in your heart. It's an experience of gratitude. And so much of it has been misunderstood. This idea of like manifest, it's like, oh, I want a red race car, so I'm just going to get one. Like, it's not that simple. But if you can tap into a desire and a dream you have, couple it with a feeling of gratitude, like you already have it, but really this idea of like, not like, oh, I already, because it can get oversimplified. And then people are like, oh, that whole thing about manifesting, it's just such BS. It's just a bunch of spiritual jargon. It can be, but it can also be deep truth if you know how to practice it correctly. And practicing it correctly, because I have come into abundance, not without heartbreak of like tearing apart everything that I held dear in order to come to it. But that's the way life works, right? Like, you have to be cracked open to let the gold, like, just like kintsugi, and we always are talking about, like, I'm always talking about this being the seed that cracks open so the light can shine through. The light of your heart is the same light that in a very materialistic way is the gold. And back when finances were, now it's just this computer thing that's gone wild, but like back when it was based on gold currency, like gold being the heart of the earth, like it's a high frequency metal. And so this idea that like it is all interconnected, but if you can get to this place of like, again, from that storybook or Dolly Parton's feeling of like this coat of rags, like she was so grateful for that. She was grateful for what she had, for the love she had. And because of that, she cultivated it into a dream that became, I mean, now she started the whole, so many kids have benefited from this lend. She's done so many anthropic endeavors to help others. And the reason I bring up Dolly Parton is for those of you who just joined because of this cute little mug of what would Dolly do. And when I'm at a crossroads, I often think about, she gave me the hope also because she's 75 and I'm 48 and I'm like, I'm just getting started. But I'm like, if Dolly can be doing it, it can be rocking it at 75, I can be doing this at 48. And like age is just a number. And I think ageism, just like sexism and racism, they are isms that systems of oppression that do keep us down. But I think that if we don't let that stop us, I'll have a sip of my tea, of my Dolly tea. But if we don't let that stop us, sorry, I shouldn't talk when I'm not by my mic. If we don't let that stop us and we continue to cultivate these inner feelings of wonder, of gratitude, of knowing that it really isn't about, see, here's the thing, here's the trick, that have how they keep us small. If your thinking and your feeling life remain in that place, like I talk a lot about stuck in the hindbrain with the fight or flight or the flee, when you're stuck in that place of survival, which is where they want to keep us, which is where all the systems of oppression want you to stay on on the rat reel of like 9 to 5, 9 to 5, 9 to 5. Another Dolly song with her little typing, which is a really famous song you guys have probably heard. Um, Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the chorus to that song, otherwise I would sing it, but I love that one too. Um, next reel, I'll sing another Dolly, and maybe I'll be a little more prepared to actually sing the lyrics. But anyway, yeah, I know you guys know the song 9 to 5, it's so famous. But anyway, that idea of like getting off the rat race and getting to that place where instead of feeling that you're fighting for survival, even if you have nothing. So what I did, getting back to my story, so I took an image of gold, a pile of gold, and I cut and paste that image. So instead of when I opened my computer and saw the folder where I had all my finances of all the debt I had to pay off, when I looked at it, it was a pile of gold. And not only did I do that on my computer, but I told myself, I was like, I am going to, um, one of the things I wanted to do was like, I want to get out from my student loans. I want to pay those off. Like, I'm not going to be in debt anymore. I'm going to get out of debt. I'm going to have abundance. And I just kept like feeling it. Like, I'm so grateful when the apartment came up, when I got on government food stamps, I was like, I have enough money. I'm not even working. And I was like, and I have money to like buy my little girl's food at the local store because I had food stamps and like, I had a roof over our heads and I wasn't in danger. Like I was super excited about it and I felt so much gratitude and I was like, this is the feeling I need to cultivate. And I kept cultivating it and I ended up you could say manifesting or stumbling into, or like the lady on her path, I meet my soulmate Finn, who came from family money and who had plenty of abundance to share with me and the girls and to like elevate us into this place where going back, I don't know if anyone heard it because I didn't have volume at the beginning of my reel, but I started talking about how I'm moving to Spain and what a privilege it is to be able to immigrate to another country and say, well, I have enough financial means to do this and to not have to worry. And yet it is still a lot to be a mama, single mama, taking 4 kids, 2 dogs, 2 cats to a different country and figuring out like the visa and the rental and the school and the this but it all costs money, which back when I was living in my safe house apartment, there's no way I was going to be doing it, but it's all relative. Like now I get to live this other dream and it comes with a whole new set of complications. And so, regardless of when I was in the safe house, just using government food stamps, or now I'm like figuring out how to pay a whole year's worth of rent in advance so that I can even rent as an American because they're like, we need you to have a job in Spain, otherwise you can't rent. And I'm like, and I'm sure there's a way to figure it out, but I'm like, I actually have the resources that I could pay a year's worth of rent in advance. Like, and it's not that I'm saying that to be like, oh, look at me. And most people don't even talk about finances. So it's probably taboo that I'm even telling you guys this. But if you know me, you know that I don't filter and I share everything. So I guess my point is that like I have the privilege of being able to do this and to be able to make that call. And I know what it's like to not. And I know that the key ingredient to being like the lover who was walking around with his medallion, like he had so much of the gold that he's like, here, take this. That the value for him was making his sweetheart happy with flowers. And the value for, whereas the woman who was homeless with her 2 babies like me, like the value at that point was having enough to pay the rent for her home. So I think that like when you can get into a place of realizing that yes, you do need money and it's a feeling underneath the monies, and going back to the story of putting the gold on top of the student debt. So, and on top of like the credit card debt. When I met Finn and when we got ended up getting married, the very first thing he did when we ended up joining finances, which he offered spontaneously, he's like, "You know what I'm gonna do first thing? I'm gonna pay off those student loans of yours." And I remember like choking up and being like, that was not something I would have never asked him to do, but he automatically did it, and it was this thing that I had been very intentional about. I had been like, "I'm going to pay off those student loans, like, I want that chain off from around my neck." And so I think that dreams do come true, and like Dolly Parton, it's "What would Dolly do?" She's the first person to tell you to believe in your dreams. She helped me believe in this dream of like I could be an inspirational teacher, talker, writer. I could be a singer-songwriter like her because I love to do that too. And that didn't matter what age I was, didn't matter where I was starting off from, like you can do it. And that is what abundance is. And when you tap in, like Bashar was saying, or Lee Harris back when I was following him, and I would go into the supermarket with my girls and I'd be like, I am so blessed that I can be shopping in North Boulder at Whole Foods, for those of you who live in America, on food stamps because they took them. Um, well, food stamps is like cash in an account that you could use on a debit card basically. So any grocery store took them. But like I was using food stamps to shop at Whole Foods, which is a bougie high-end. Well, now I'm trying to boycott Whole Foods actually because it's owned by Amazon and I'm trying to boycott Amazon. So full circle, I'm boycotting. But before that, I was shopping there and very grateful. And the point is that like it is all relative, but it's a feeling in your heart. So abundance is a feeling in your heart. And here's my heart, because guess what? I'm grateful for you guys. You guys are the reason that I get to be here living my passion. You guys are the reason that I get to follow this dream of talking about things that have helped me and trying to help others. And if it weren't for you guys, I wouldn't be able to be here sharing. And so, again, the reciprocity that exists in like you guys tuning in and those that will watch later and those that are here now that allow me to do what I love to do. And I'm just so grateful, and that's abundance. So anyway, I'm tuning out and I love you guys. Thank you for joining me, and hope you got something from my storytelling, and I wish you all the best and lots of love. Sending it now and always. Bye bye.